This town isn't big enough for two supervillains.
Oh, you're a villain, all right. Just not a super one.
Yeah? What's the difference?
Presentation!
Everyone loves a good hero. Whether a superhero or just your average underdog working hard to save the day, we all want to see our beloved heroes succeed. But ultimately, a hero's strengths and appeal very much depend on the villain that they're fighting. Put up any hero against a villain too weak or boring, and the joy we feel seeing them take this villain out is going to be diminished. A hero is only as strong as the villain that they're facing. In today's cinema culture, a lot of the movies we're seeing are either superhero movies or movies big enough to be easily comparable to superheroes. Throughout all these movies, we've seen a lot of supervillains, some good, some bad, and some ugly. But sometimes, the best way to show how to properly pull off a concept in writing is by comparing an example that got it right and an example that got it wrong. So today, let's make a pretty lopsided comparison to figure out how to write a supervillain.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
In the corner of supervillain done right, we have Thanos, the villain of Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, a villain that is widely known and remembered by fans and non-fans alike, a villain genuinely well received by most audiences. In the corner of supervillain done wrong, we have Steppenwolf, the villain of Justice League. If you've never heard of him or know nothing about him, then you are not alone, as he massively failed to grab the attention of audiences outside of negative criticism. To properly compare the two, we need to know who they are first, and I feel that begins with asking 4 questions. Those being, who are they, what do they want, why do they want it, and what is their plan? Let's begin with Thanos. Thanos is a being from the planet Titan, a planet destroyed due to overconsumption of resources, who now lives as a warlord wreaking havoc throughout the galaxy, all in the name of saving others from his fate. What does he want? He wants to kill half of the universe in order to bring balance and ensure no world is ever destroyed by overpopulation ever again. Why does he want it? Well, because he genuinely thinks he's doing the right thing, and is stubbornly convinced that his way is the only way to save the universe. What is his plan? To take control of mysterious objects of power known as the Infinity Stones, and using their combined strength to snap his fingers and kill half the universe. Now let's look at Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf is a being from a war-torn wasteland world who once tried to conquer the Earth but was defeated. What does he want? To conquer the Earth again and turn it into a scorched wasteland just like his own world. Why does he want this? Because he really likes conquering things, I think. What is his plan? To take control of 3 magic boxes that have the power to combine and turn the world into said scorched landscape. Okay, so just explaining who they are and what they want kind of reveals the first issue. That being that Thanos' motivations are well developed and actually quite interesting, and Steppenwolf's are not. Thanos, in many cases, clearly sees himself as the hero of his own story. He is the well-intentioned extremist, who believes he's committing a necessary evil in order to save the universe. Steppenwolf, on the other hand, just wants to conquer and destroy everything because he can. At one point he does say something about working for Darkseid, but this never goes anywhere. What makes Thanos especially interesting is that he claims once he's accomplished his goal of killing half the universe, then he'll just give up his armies and power and go live a quiet life. And he actually does. He doesn't turn around and decide to become king of the ruined universe. He genuinely just wanted to accomplish his goal and was completely convinced it was the right thing to do. He's not evil for the sake of being evil. He's just one man completely convinced of his own righteousness. Steppenwolf, on the other hand, never has any moments like that. or in fact any real moments at all. Steppenwolf never develops as a character. He never has a proper conversation with anyone, and that's a problem. This brings me to an important point. The best villains are villains who make things personal. Villains who have a proper connection to the hero, and villains who specifically wrong the hero. Thanos has both of these things. First, he has a connection to Gamora and Nebula as he is their adoptive father and raised them essentially to be his own weapons. Thus, when we see them talking, we see what he's really like because he's speaking to someone who truly knows him. One of the best scenes in Infinity War is when he first finds Gamora as he's slaughtering her people. Despite what he's doing, he actually distracts her from the carnage so as not to upset her, and takes her in as his own, showing kindness in spite of the real truth. Secondly, he does make things very personal with Thor and later on Star-Lord and Scarlet Witch by outright murdering their loved ones. Because Thanos actually has these connections, the fights between them aren't just a hero trying to beat an obstacle to save the world. It's the hero trying to take out the man who personally ruined their life. Now, let's compare Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf has no idea who the Justice League are, and aside from Wonder Woman and I think Aquaman, none of them really know who he is. The closest he gets to making it personal is by kidnapping Cyborg's father, who is easily rescued and thus very little damage is done. The problem here is that the heroes need to beat Steppenwolf, but they don't want to. I mean, sure, they want to, in the sense that they don't want him to annihilate the Earth, but there's no personal deep-seated anger nor desperation to see him defeated. He's nothing more than an obstacle, no different than just a big door they need to knock down in order to get to the finish line. As Megamind taught us, the big difference between a villain and a supervillain is presentation. But I'd like to further elaborate on that. To me, the right presentation of a supervillain should be a combination of power and presence. You need to show that the villain has immense power, be it physical or political or both, to the point where they are a true threat to our heroes. As well as this, they need to be intimidating. The audience needs to believe that any time they appear on screen, our heroes are in mortal danger. Often, to really get across the power and presence of a villain, you need a good establishing moment, as in a scene that proves that they're a deadly threat that the heroes should all fear. For Thanos, this moment is shown in the first scene of Infinity War, wherein he takes over Thor's ship, manages to beat both him and the Hulk, and murders Loki. The first scene of the film, we see two of the strongest Avengers get wiped out by this guy, and then Loki, who's been around from the start and always seems to get away, is killed before our eyes. If Thanos wasn't a threat before, he certainly is now. Not only is he one of the most powerful foes the Avengers have ever faced, he is clearly willing to go to any lengths to get the stones. This scene properly shows us that Thanos well and truly means business. Now let's look at Steppenwolf. About the closest he gets to establishing himself as a threat is him ripping off Cyborg's leg. Alright, except that happens during the final battle. Up to this point, all Steppenwolf has accomplished is failing to conquer the Earth the first time round, managing to steal some boxes, and kidnapping some people only for them to be easily rescued. I think the movie expected him stealing the boxes would be enough to show him as a credible threat. But unfortunately, this falls flat for one simple reason. These boxes were so poorly guarded. The Amazons keep theirs in an easily accessible cave that any old bozo could just break out of, while the Atlanteans have about 2 people guarding theirs. Rather than making Steppenwolf look strong, these scenes only serve to make both cultures look like a pile of doofuses. When Steppenwolf fights the group, He is able to take out some like Batman, who has no powers, but thanks to Wonder Woman, he never seems particularly at an advantage during their fights, given she seems to pretty much be an even match for him. And then Superman happens. The lack of any establishing threat scenes also means that this movie just fails to properly establish what Steppenwolf's powers really are. Right, so he has a magic axe? What else exactly? There's one moment when Cyborg was flying away from him when I sat back and asked, wait, can Steppenwolf fly too? How high can he jump? I don't believe it was ever established. With Thanos, I can understand that he's harnessing the powers of the Infinity Stones and that each one has a power corresponding to what they represent, like the Space Stone allowing him to teleport or the Time Stone allowing him to reverse time. Thus, whenever someone is going up against Thanos, I generally have some idea of how it's going to go for them, and the answer is usually not good. Whenever someone goes up against Steppenwolf, my assumption is that they probably do have a chance of winning, given he's shown to not be especially amazing in battle. But fighting isn't Steppenwolf's only problem. He also has a serious communication problem, because, as I've said, we never see him properly talking to anyone. His dialogue almost completely consists of random, overdramatic taunts during battle and big evil speeches to his minions. As a result, we never get any idea of who he really is or what his personality is really like. Thanos, on the other hand, does have many straight-up conversations with people, which actually do show us who he is. He's stubborn and completely convinced of his own self-righteousness, but at the same time, he's remorseful as what happened to his own planet and genuinely does want to save others. As a result, he's a lot more humanized as a character, not just evil for the sake of evil. Ironically, while Steppenwolf on the surface seems like the far more villainous character, given his goals are just conquer and destroy for his own selfish gains, Thanos is the far superior villain. Sometimes the best villains are those that genuinely believe they are the hero of the story. While Steppenwolf is a generic evil guy who can't be reasoned with, Thanos is a genuine person who can be reasoned with, but still chooses to do what he does anyway. Ultimately, the best way to sum up why Thanos is a better villain than Steppenwolf is that Thanos is written like a supervillain, while Steppenwolf is written like a minion. Steppenwolf is, of course, technically speaking, just a minion of Darkseid, but, well, Darkseid isn't here, so we need someone to fill the villainous void, and he certainly isn't doing the job. It's possible to have a successful villain who's working for a higher force, look at Loki from the first Avengers, but while Loki at least felt like a proper boss fight on the lead up to the final boss, Steppenwolf feels more like a mini-boss, and you cannot put that sort of villain in the role of main antagonist for the first franchise. Steppenwolf would be criticised if he were the villain of a standalone DC movie, but at least this could have been shaken off as a fluke, or could have been ignored because more focus goes onto the single hero. I mean, Steppenwolf even looks too similar to Ares from Wonder Woman, who, while much more interesting than Steppenwolf, still wasn't a great villain, yet didn't detract too much from that movie. That's because the stakes in standalone hero movies tend to be a lot lower. To justify the entire Justice League fighting a villain rather than just one of them, I need to believe that the villain is truly a terrifying threat, not just Darkseid's lousiest henchman. And the fact that Superman can quite easily take him out single-handedly kind of proves that. To conclude, there are lots of ways to write a supervillain, and they don't all necessarily need to be just like Thanos, as I'm sure his popularity will result in a lot of Thanos clones coming our way soon, but more to the point, they just need to follow these basic rules. Number 1, they need to have a clear motivation and personality. Number 2, they need to prove that they are truly a credible threat that our heroes have every reason to fear. Number 3, They need to actually make things personal with the hero and prove to be more than just an obstacle in the way of saving the day. And number 4, they need to actually stand out. They need a unique look, a clear power set, and an original drive and personality. What makes Steppenwolf any different to Ares from Wonder Woman? I mean, well, Ares has a basic personality, I guess. While Justice League had its fair share of problems and Infinity War has its fair share of strengths, I think it's important to emphasise just how much their qualities depended on their villain. When you mention Infinity War, you think of Thanos. Thanos has such an impact. Thanos practically carries the story. When you think of Justice League, you don't think of Steppenwolf, unless the context is why Justice League sucked. He's so bland, so forgettable, and so non-threatening that it just completely drags the excitement down. And that's why the former was such a huge success, and the latter crashed and burned. Thanks for watching the video. If you think there are other movies I should compare, be sure to comment below. Do you think my assessment of these villains was inaccurate? Do you think there exists a worse villain than Steppenwolf? Well, be sure to comment that too. Hope you're all doing well, and I hope to speak to you again in the future. Goodbye.